Hello everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to today's Wild Rift video, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the tier list for patch 2.4c in the bot lane. Now I've added a new tier now into the tier list because make it a bit more specific. I've added in a new A+ tier, so it kind of separates the S and the A tier a bit more and gives you all a bit more idea of where champions sit at the moment. So we're going to be looking at AD carry and we're going to be looking at support. If you do enjoy this type of content, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want more content. Over the next few days, I'll be releasing a lot of fun content that I've been getting on stream. A new Xayah build, a really insane Lucian game with the new buffs as well. So that's all to come, which is all going to be really, really fun. But for today, we're looking at the tier list, and at the top of the AD carry tier list is none other than Kai'Sa. She's still really, really strong. You still go for the Solari Charge Blade instead of the Hurricane. Really, really strong. Can solo carry so well. Can kite really well as well. Really, really good. Just self-sustained champion that can pretty much solo carry. Don't really need like a support really next to her. But if she does have like a Nunu or Lulu, sorry, not a Nunu, a Lulu and a Nami next to her as well, or even a Janna, then she gets even stronger. So really, really nice solo carry potential and just a really strong champion overall. Next up in the S tier, we have Varus. Now, Varus is still really strong because of all of his poke that he does. Make sure you don't go AP Varus. It's not that strong. Sometimes AP Varus might be okay if your team is full AD. But even then, I would still say that lethality is even better because you get a lot of armor penetration in the lethality build anyway. So you won't be affected too much by the armor being built by the enemy team. But really safe champion, really low cooldowns, can stay back, can farm up really well in the laning phase as well. Just overall, a really, really strong champion. Corki, again, really, really strong still as well. You still go for the same build, the Essence Reaver, Solari Charge Blade, and the Infinity Edge, and them three items going crit. Corki is really, really strong. Obviously, you're more aligned on your auto attacks with this build instead of your abilities, so that works really, really well. Xayah, really, really safe champion, really, really nice to play as well. As mentioned, I got a new build for Xayah, but I won't spoil it just yet. You'll be able to see in the next video what my new Xayah build is, and it's a really, really strong build as well, which makes Xayah kind of spike a bit earlier in the early game, because I think that's kind of the downside of Xayah at the moment, is that she doesn't really spike well in terms of the early game, so you want her to be able to, get as much damage as early as possible so she can do a lot of damage with her feathers. But still, overall, a really, really strong champion, really great champion as well. Ezreal, again, a really safe champion to play, can poke from range, is really, really strong. And yeah, just overall a great champion. Doesn't really have the amount of carry potential that maybe Xayah and Corki does in terms of consistent DPS. But a very safe champion to play. If you do get a few items, the Trinity Force and Man Immune and the Serrader's Grudge, if you get them free items, he can be one of the best AD carries in the entire game. Now, for the new A+ tier, what have I done? So I've moved Lucian down to A+ from S. Now, even though Lucian did get a buff, it was only like 40 HP in terms of the early game. The buff to the third ability by like 1 second at every rank doesn't really do that much. But Lucian did kind of take a bit of a hit. I think I kind of overpowered him a little bit in the previous patch. I put him in the S tier, the same tier as like Varus, Corki, Xayah, and Ezreal, which I definitely don't think he's as strong as M3. I think he's a much better mid laner than a bot lane duo now. Obviously, he got nerfed himself, even though he got buffed recently. He also got nerfed in the previous patch, and he also got nerfs with his items as well, the Essence Reaver and the Solari Charge Blade. So overall, Lucian did take a really, really big hit. He's not as strong, but he's still really, really good. You can still carry early on if you get an early lead. And yeah, just one of them champions that kind of needs an early lead to get that advantage, but still has the dash, can really, really play safe. If you do use your combos correctly as well, he can be really, really strong. Vayne, I've moved Vayne up into the A+ tier. I think Vayne is better than Draven, Tristana, and Jinx at the moment, but not as strong as these, AD carries with the Varus and the Ezreal. With Vayne, she struggles a lot in terms of the early game. but she can scale up and she can be really, really strong when it comes to mid and the late game. Once you buy Blade of Ruin King, Solari Charge Blade, Infinity Edge, then you can go maybe like Static Shiv or Phantom Dancer as well. You get that 75% crit in with Solari Charge Blade. You have the IE for your crits to do even more damage, and just overall a really strong champion. The reason why she's not higher is because she is kind of hard to play. Like for an average player, if you don't understand her limits early on in the early game, then you can get punished really, really hard. And it is a little bit of a struggle at times if you get behind in the early game. Draven, kind of the complete opposite with Vayne. Draven needs an early game lead, and you need to get early kills with Draven, and you need to know how to do this with Draven. Now, Draven's a really, really hard champion to play, really hard to master as well. But if you can understand how to catch his axes, if you can understand his limits early on, and how you can get kills in the early game, then you can pretty much 1v9 the whole game for sure. Like, you can still carry with Draven, but he's just one of them champions that are really, really difficult to play. Tristana. Tristana is still quite a good champion to play. Obviously scales really well into the mid and the late game. Again, another one of them champions that is pretty hard to play because of her explosive bomb. When you put the explosive bomb on someone, you want to try and auto-attack that same champion. Now, League PC is really easy because you can just click wherever you want. But it's a little bit harder on mobile because you need to make sure you focus that same champion. If you accidentally auto-attack a different champion instead, then you're not going to get the full stacks of the bomb off, which means you won't get enough damage and you won't get that W reset as well, the jump reset. So that's the reason why Tristana's pretty low. She is still quite a fun champion to play. She's still really strong as well, but she's just quite difficult to master. Jinx can still work really, really well. Just doesn't really have a lot of mobility or capability, I should say, as the other crit AD carries at the moment. Obviously, Jinx Lulu can still be really, really strong, but she can get punished again in terms of the early game, very similar to Vayne. But Vayne has a lot better late game potential than Jinx. Now, the reason why Jinx is so low is because she doesn't really work well with Solari Charge Blade, and Solari Charge Blade is still one of the strongest items in the game, even though it did get nerfed. The magic damage it does is still really, really strong. Still has a lot of ability haste, and it basically gives you a free 50%, you know, crit rate as well, which Jinx doesn't really, you know, benefit from Solari Charge Blade that much because she's not using her abilities that often. She's not really doing that much with her abilities, like Vayne, for example, that tumbles all the time. You got Lucian that dashes all the time, he uses her abilities, you know. So Jinx likes to go for more of like the 100% crit build, so like IE, Runa's Hurricane, Rapid Fire Cannon, and then maybe like a Bloodthirster or something like that. But obviously that takes away one item, and then the last item will need to be probably some armor penetration, so you don't really have that defensive item in there. But if you do pair Jinx with Lulu or with Janna or with Nami, it's still really, really strong. So, yeah, she can still carry for sure. Jhin is still... I might actually put a, like, daily petition out on on Twitter, which is, like, day one, me asking Riot to buff Jhin. I really want this champion to be buffed. I mean, I just want Jhin to be good again, you know? Like, Jhin was so fun to play, and is still really, really fun to play, to be fair. I mean, to be honest, he was a little bit overpowered before with the whole GA plus champion meta, but... he just doesn't have that anymore. And now that you have all these crit AD carries that have all these really, really strong items, Jhin is just going lower and lower down the tier list, unfortunately, because his consistent damage output is just not as high as, like, you know, the other AD carries above. Senna, now just to be clear, this is farming Senna, this is not fasting Senna, because it is a solo queue tier list. It is going to be farming Senna, because most of the time when you play solo queue, people won't understand what fasting Senna means. So farming Senna, not as good as fasting Senna. If it was fasting Senna, I'd probably put her at maybe A+, to be honest. The same with like Vayne and Lucian. Can be really, really strong, but you're kind of reliant on your support as well, because your support is farming and doing a lot in terms of damage. But Senna, farming, not really too strong. You want to play fasting Senna because you want to try and stack as many souls as possible, and you still get quite a lot of gold as well, so it's quite nice. And the last two items, Ash and Misfortune. Both of them just really, really bad right now. Ash just doesn't really do enough damage. Is a lot better in pro play than actual solo queue, because you can kind of communicate when you're going to be using your arrow, when you're going to be using your utility, and you can work really well with Hawkshot, her third ability, to try and get vision on the enemy jungle. But In terms of solo queue, doesn't really work too well. Doesn't have that hard carry potential. And Miss Fortune, the reason why Miss Fortune is at the bottom pretty much of the tier list is because, you know, she hasn't really come back from the nerfs that she received a few patches. Well, I say a few patches ago. It's quite a long time ago now, when Miss Fortune was one of the best AD carries, and she had the situation where she was kind of dumpstered in terms of nerfs. She got her passive damage nerf. I think it was her Q damage got nerfed as well, and also her minion damage got nerfed as well. And the thing is, now that the meta's like this whole assassin dive heavy, you know, you got Camille, you got Rengar, you got Kha'Zix, you got all these champions that could dive on top of you. When Miss Fortune uses her ultimate now, she just can't do anything. Like, someone jumps onto her and then she has to cancel her ultimate. So most of the time, you can't really get your full ultimate off with Miss Fortune. And now the reason why Miss Fortune was good before was because there wasn't really any of these, you know, assassin champions that could really jump on Miss Fortune. It was very front to back heavy, you know. You had the cannons, you had the Malphites and things like that as well. You had the Amumus, which were quite strong before. And it was always this front to back, you know, team fight sort of group at 4 minutes sort of game, I guess you can say. But now it's more of like a dive heavy, can't even talk, dive heavy solo queue sort of mentality, which Miss Fortune doesn't really work well in at all, because Miss Fortune wants to stay there. She wants to auto attack as much as possible. She wants to switch targets, and she wants to use her ultimate for a huge, massive AoE damage. Yeah, unfortunately, not really too much there. Now, I've done the same with support as well. Support, I've also added the A+ tier, and we also have Brand in there as well. But before we talk about Brand, let's talk about Nami and Lulu in the S+ tier. Both these champions insanely strong. Now, obviously, nothing has really changed with them at all. Starflower Flowing Water still really, really strong. Ardent Sensor still really, really strong. Crit AD carries still really, really strong. And what works well with crit AD carries is a lot of ability haste, is a lot of attack speed, a lot of damage as well from Ardent Sensor, and that's what works well with Nami and Lulu, and even Janna as well. The reason why Janna is below Nami and Lulu is because Nami and Lulu just brings a lot more to the table. Nami have a lot of crowd control, and it can work well with a lot of AD carries, and Lulu just has better shielding and better abilities than Janna, and also has the ultimate that gives you a lot of health as well. Now, moving on to S, I'm going to quickly talk about Janna. Obviously, Janna still an Enchanter support, still really, really strong. And the reason why she's not as strong as Nami and Lulu is because she's more of like a disengaged support. You know, she has a few abilities that is really good for disengaging, which, don't get me wrong, is really, really good in some situations against certain compositions, which is why Janna is still in the S tier. But you don't really need it sometimes. Sometimes you need like champions that want to, you know, be aggressive. You know, you got Lulu with the movement speed. She can play aggressive, or she can get other champions to play aggressive. Nami, you have the movement speed as well. Nami, you have your third ability, which can slow down enemies. You have her ultimate, which is really impactful on her bubble. You know, Lulu, you have her ultimate as well, which when enemies engage, you know, you can use your ultimate. With Janna, you kind of just really have your shield, and that's about it. You can use your second ability to slow. Doesn't really do that much compared to like Nami slow, for example, that she could put on herself or onto her AD carry. But yeah, that's the reason why Janna is below Nami and Lulu. Just wanted to quickly explain that. Braum, still really, really strong. One of the strongest, if not the strongest tank jungler at the moment. Yeah, just really, really insane overall. Has a shield that can block everything. His disengage is really strong. His passive is really, really strong, especially in the laning phase. If you can proc the passive in the laning phase, you could basically get a lot of free damage as an AD carry. It's happened multiple times to me, which is really, really nice. Now, let's quickly talk about Brand. Now, the reason why Brand is not S+ tier is because I feel like people don't really understand how to play against Brand yet. Now, I don't think Brand is insanely strong in the support. I think he's a much better mid laner than a support at the moment, but he is still really, really strong. His poke is really insane. His team fight potential is really insane. You know, you can catch out enemies with his crowd control as well, with his Ablaze passive. And the one thing you need to understand with Brand is you need to kind of stay behind minions. It's kind of similar to the way kind of similar way to like, you know, Thresh maybe works, or even someone like a Lux, for example, as well. You know, you want to kind of stay behind the minions. The reason why is because Brand most of the time wants to walk up, wants to use his third ability to get the easy passive proc off, and he wants to use his first ability to crowd control an enemy. And after that, he can easily use his second ability and get his second passive off, which allows him to do even more damage. Now, he wants to walk up and he wants to do that all the time. Now, champions that are really good with Brand are champions that can engage onto Brand, you know, not these enchanter supports. Don't pick an enchanter support into Brand. Pick a Thresh, pick a Rakan, pick Leona, pick Alistar, pick these engaged supports that want to go into Brand, because Brand wants to step up. But if you can hook a Brand, if you can knock him up or just crowd control him, he doesn't have a lot of health and he can be punished really, really easily, which is why I think that Brand is not, you know, that strong. Because if people understand and know how to play against Brand support, then he'll definitely won't be as strong as what he is at the moment. That's a little thing about Brand. Now, moving on, we've got the A+ tier, which is obviously the new tier. Now, what we've done is we've moved Thresh down a tier. Now, even though Thresh has been buffed, I still don't think he's as strong as Braum and Janna. I think he's roughly on the same tier as all of these, maybe in the middle of the two, to be fair. Thresh is still quite good, very, very good solo carry potential. Obviously, got buffed in the previous patch as well, which is quite nice. But again, just not this patch gone, sorry, the patch before, but just not as good and still not as strong as the supports above. Again, with Rakan, still really, really strong, but just not as strong as the supports above. I could probably put like Thresh and Rakan maybe an A++ tier, or leave like these three in A+ tier. Maybe that could be a thing. I'm not gonna go like crazy with the tier list, but Rakan Rosaya, really, really strong. Rakan by himself is not as strong, but he does have a lot of good solo carry potential as well. The same with Thresh. You can engage, you can get a lot of engaging potential off. You have a lot of mobility, so you can keep dashing around everywhere as well, which is really, really nice. And yeah, just overall a great champion. Leona. Now, Leona is a fairly good champion as well. A lot of single target crowd control. Doesn't really have a lot in terms of you know, heavy team fight crowd control. Leona's very good at picking someone off. If someone's off by themselves, she can use her ultimate, she can engage, and she can basically burst someone from 100 to 0 when the AD carry follows up. So if you are playing with Leona, make sure you do watch her all the time, and make sure you know when to engage once the Leona has gone in as well. Senna support, still fairly good. Not really as strong as before, really, to be honest. These enchanter supports are just really, really strong. The same with Brand as well. Brand works really, really well with Senna, because Senna wants to walk up and take souls, and every time Senna walks up to take souls, Brand can just get an easy bit of poke damage off. So not as strong, but still can be really, really strong. Obviously you can farm a lot of souls with support Senna, and you can go for this like more utility sort of armor penetration build with the Black Cleaver. You can go for healing reduction as well with Executioner's Calling. So yeah, still really, really good support. Alistar, again, still quite a good support as well. You want to go for the, a full-on engage Alistar, with the Denman's Plate, Force of Nature, all these items as well, which work really, really well with Alistar. And he can still solo carry, a game, in my opinion. If you get a Headbutt Pulverize, if you get a, 5-man Pulverize into a, Yasuo Ultimate or something like that, you can still carry quite well, and you can catch out enemies quite easily. Obviously, he struggles a little bit in against the Enchanter supports, but can do quite well, into like Brand, into Rakan as well, Headbutt away into Leona as well. So, Alistar does do quite well into some supports, even Thresh as well. Now, Sona got a nerf. I don't think the nerf was as impactful as what people thought it would be. I still think Sona is still going to be really, really strong as a support. She's not going to obviously scale as well into support in terms of her damage because of her first ability, but her healing and her shielding is still going to be there. It's still going to be really, really strong. Obviously, the ultimate, I think, got nerfed by about 10 seconds at each rank. I can't remember the numbers exactly. Obviously, 10 seconds is 10 seconds, but it's not that big of a deal. She's still quite strong. She hasn't moved at all. She hasn't moved up a tier or down the tier. She's not as weak as Soraka, but she's not as strong as the carries above. But I would say she's on the same level as some of these supports. Same with Seraphine as well. Seraphine still has a lot of shielding and healing power. Just make sure you go for support Seraphine. You can have a lot of impact as well in the game if you do land your ultimate, but it does rely a lot on her skill shots. If you don't land her skill shots, then she pretty much becomes useless unless you shield all the time with your second ability. Lux, now Lux is just getting kind of worse and worse as the patch goes on, in my opinion. Because, she was strong before, but then she got nerfed, and now she's not really being played too much because she can't really proc Ardent Sensor or Starfall Foam Water or Harmonic Echo as much as other supports. Her shield is not up as often, and she really struggles with mana in the early game. Now, most of the time with Lux, you want to poke in the early game, you want to use your abilities to try and catch out enemies. 2 seconds, I'm just going to take a sip of water before my voice completely goes. Yeah, with Lux, you run out of mana really, really quickly. Obviously, with Lux, you want to use your abilities as much as possible to poke down the enemies, to shield your allies, and to, just do as much damage as possible. But once you use a few abilities with Lux, then you're done. You're completely done, basically. But you can still carry with Lux, as Keys has shown many times on my stream. He does play really well with Lux, but he has played a lot of games with Lux from when she was really, really strong before in competitive. Galio can still work well as a support. Obviously, Galio with Fasting Senna is really, really strong at the moment. Same with Gragas as well. But yeah, just not as strong at the moment as some of the other supports. Does still have a lot of crowd control. Does have a lot of good protection and capability as well with his ultimate. But just doesn't really have that sort of carry potential. Soraka, just probably the worst enchanter in my opinion. You can't really do much in solo queue with Soraka. You have her shields and her heals, and that's pretty much it. You can poke a little bit in lane phase, you can silence out some people, but she doesn't have as much of a solo carry potential. Sona has her ultimate with Crescendo. Senna has her ultimate as well. They can, kind of hard carry. Lux has her ultimate as well, can do a lot of damage. These 3 enchanters, for example, are better than Soraka because they have that solo carry potential that they can bring to the table. But Soraka doesn't really have that, unfortunately. She just has a lot of shielding and healing, so she relies a lot on her team. And lastly, we got Blitzcrank. I mean, Blitzcrank's just Blitzcrank. Nothing really to say. Kind of useless. Got buffed. Doesn't really do that much. Yeah. Blitzcrank is Blitzcrank. I just remembered that I didn't put AKSHAN in here. AKSHAN probably sits in like B tier, in my opinion. Yeah, that's where AKSHAN would live there. I can't see AKSHAN here on the list of champions that I have, so we'll just put Aphelios there. There you go. AKSHAN is there, B tier. Maybe, nah, B tier. If you don't know who Aphelios is, one of the champions that I really want to come up to Wild Rift. But yeah, AKSHAN is down in the B tier. Just doesn't really offer too much as an AD carry. Probably can work well in mid lane, but as an AD carry, just not as good, unfortunately. But anyway, that's my tier list. Hopefully you all enjoyed the tier list. I did kind of talk for a long time. But hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you all learned a thing or two about the meta at the moment. But the meta's in quite a stable state. Obviously, the previous patch was a small patch, but the next big patch is patch 2.5, which will be in about 3 weeks' time today. So 3 weeks today will be the big 2.5 update. Hopefully they add some new champions, some new items. Obviously a few champions got leaked already. Caitlyn and AD carry, which I'm really looking forward to. Jace and Vegas, we'll have to see how that kind of, puts up with the whole thing. And yeah, we're definitely looking forward to it. But yeah, make sure you tune into the new videos that will be coming out the rest of this week and beginning of next week. New Xayah build. Some crazy other builds as well. Some crazy other champions that I've been trying out in the bot lane. So make sure you all stay tuned for that. As always, take care of yourselves. Thank you all for tuning in. And I'll see you all very soon. Peace.